Hey, deserving listeners, a lot of you have been emailing us for the past, few weeks saying that we should talk about The Queen's Gambit, which is a Netflix miniseries. So let's talk about it. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk. I'm a therapist and a professor, and I gave this a 7 out of 10.
Ooh, my name is Humberto Castañeda, and I'm a home loan illumination officer. I gave it an 8.
I'm Collin Miller. I work for Psychology in Seattle, and also I'm working with Brian Falduto and the Gay Men's Mindfulness Collective, and I gave it an 8 as well.
Yeah, so let's get into the psychology of Queen's Gambit. We'll get into what we liked and disliked about it in a second, but people come here to talk about psychology, and the first thing I want to talk about is the medication that she was taking. What did you two lay people think of the medication?
I got the sense, I didn't look it up or anything, but I got the sense that they were being overt with the colors so that we would know when she was taking one versus the other. And then they kept those same pills throughout the series, even as the years passed. My guess was, again, to let the viewers know that's what she's taking. I didn't imagine that all that medication was always the same, but maybe it was, you can tell me. But I was horrified at first when I'm like, oh my gosh, they used to sedate the orphan kids? No. And then the scene when she like downs a whole handful, I was like, no! Oh, I pretty much felt like I was the one ingesting the medicine at that point.
Yeah. Collin, what do you think of the medication?
A lot of the experience of watching it for me was on a symbolic level, and I would include the drugs in that. Let me clarify a bit because it's extremely vague. So I don't know how to play chess. I believe I know the way each piece moves, but in terms of strategies or comprehension of how to be good, that's kind of beyond me. So that's still true. Watch the show, still true. But I think on a symbolic level, I still very much attached to what each game and play meant. And it was the same for me with the pills that she was taking. Even though I didn't know what they represented in the real world, I knew what they represented for her as a character. And so I only know about it on those terms.
Right. Okay. Well, let me talk for a bit about it. So in the show, and I believe in the book, it's called Zanzilam, which is a fictional medication that doesn't really exist. And you heard them refer to it as a tranquilizer. But and the symptoms that we saw from taking it was drowsiness. You see that in the beginning. She takes it early in the morning instead of at night, and she's very drowsy and kind of out of it. Almost like she was zonked out like a zombie, which is usually indicative of like an antipsychotic. But there are many medications that make you drowsy. You also see that she hallucinates because, there was no real, you could argue that she was imagining the chessboard and she knew it was imagining. She knew it was her imagination, but the way they depicted it, particularly at the end when she looks up at the ceiling, she clearly is seeing something. She's seeing something, and they make it look like a hallucination. They also made it seem like the medication helped her with her creativity, but in the end, they showed, no, she doesn't need the medication to be creative. So, which I was happy about. They also showed that when she went through withdrawal symptoms, she got itchy and irritable. So it's unclear exactly what medication this is a analogy to, but it's likely an early benzodiazepine called Librium or chlordiazepazide. Diazepazide. It was developed in the 50s and 60s, and it was one of the very first benzodiazepines. So you've heard of Valium, right? The two of you have heard of Valium. You've heard of Xanax, right?
Yep.
So these are all benzodiazepines, and what they're used for is for anxiety. And I've taken them when I go to the doctor for a procedure, like when I had a dental surgery where they had to install a post into my jaw, right? So they had to use several different drill bits, increasingly in width,
in diameter,
to drill into my jaw, and that they had to cut back my gums, and then they had to put stuff in there. This was not a pleasant procedure, and
awesome.
It took a long time, and I'm not great with these things anyway. And my dentist, who Asian, doesn't really matter. He also has dental anxiety, and he gave me a prescription for Valium, and said, take 2 or 3 of these pills beforehand. And I did, and not only did the medication help, it erased the anxiety. I laid there without a care in the world. And I wasn't particularly high. I mean, I was a little loopy, a little drunk, if you will, but not a lot. I was totally aware of what was going on, and I wasn't even particularly drowsy. After the procedure, I immediately took a nap for like 2 hours. But during the procedure, I'm just sitting there like hum-de-dum, like as if I was watching a boring TV show. And it was the weirdest thing. And so, benzodiazepines work. And the nice thing about them is that they help you with anxiety right away. With other medications, you have to take it over time. With this medication, it's like you take it, it lasts for a certain amount of time, and then it's over. You know what I mean?
And it makes you like a chess wizard.
Yeah. So it does make you drowsy. So that's correct. That how they depict that. It doesn't make you into a zombie, though. It just makes you. It makes you not have any anxiety. It's basic. The way I've described it is it's like a 6-pack in a pill. Like you take Valium, you take Xanax or whatever, and you know how you're drunk, but not super drunk, and you don't really have any inhibitions. You don't really have. It's hard to scare you, because everything is kind of dumbed down a little bit, right? Well, that's kind of what a benzodiazepine is like, and so. You're not like a zombie when you have a 6-pack or three drinks or something. You're just more kind of carefree and things don't scare you as much. Hallucinations, very off chance that some people might experience an hallucination with a benzodiazepine, but really not likely. And creativity, there are 2 possible roads with a benzodiazepine towards creativity. One is a placebo. It might have, if you believe, and it seemed like maybe that was what they were trying to say, was that the medication wasn't needed for her to be creative, right? So it's either placebo or relaxation, because certainly when you're anxious, it's hard to be creative, right? It's hard to think straight when you're highly anxious, and when you take a benzodiazepine, particularly if you've experienced a lot of trauma in your life, your brain might actually be in a more normal state on the benzo than off the benzo. Because some people who are chronically traumatized, as she likely was, your brain is in a constant state of distress. And this is why when people are prescribed an opioid or opiate from their prescriber, people who are chronically traumatized and they're always a 5 out of 10, the lowest distress they'll ever be is a 5 out of 10. They take a Percocet or, one of the other pain pills, and they're a 0 out of 10 for the first time in their life. And they think, my goodness, this is a magical pill. I want more of these. And then eventually you run out of money and you turn to heroin because it's the cheapest thing that you can buy that has the same effect,
I got the sense that, and again, I didn't know if it was a real medicine or not, but I was pretty sure, like, because they made the pills were like always the same and stuff. I was like, okay, this is like a generic thing they're showing us. But I got the sense that they were indicating that she obviously was capable of great prowess already, but that the sense I got is that the pill helped her, like, sort of see more things in reality, which isn't exactly hallucination. It was more like maybe how taking some other types of drugs might help you like see connections that weren't there before. Right.
Which some people will report with hallucinogens and other kinds of drugs, right? But not a benzodiazepine. You know what I mean? Okay. And actually this kind of bothered me because I was like watching the show and I was really interested. I was like, okay, what medication are they trying to get at here? Because, and as soon as she started hallucinate, I was like, oh boy. Because really there's very few medications that would produce a hallucination. You know what I mean? And certainly there aren't very many pills out there you're going to take in a hospital or an orphanage to help you be creative, you know? And it just kind of bothers me that they have these just weird depictions of medications. But, what are you going to do? Now, like I said, it could have happened if you said the hallucinations weren't actual hallucinations. Like if you asked her, it's like, okay, what are you seeing? She's like, well, I'm not seeing anything. It just sort of frees up my mind to think about chess moves, and it helps me to look up because I'm less distracted or something. And the medication, I'm guessing it just helps me to relax so I can kind of concentrate on what I'm good at anyway. To be good at chess, there's no medication that makes you good at chess. You know what I mean? There's no medication that helps you think 5 moves ahead. There's only a medication that can help you relax such that your natural talent of thinking ahead can manifest. You know what I mean? So I didn't really like that, but yeah. Have you ever taken a benzo, Collin?
No, I have not. I have family members who take them for plane trips, though.
Right.
So.
Yeah, a lot of people will take it for plane trips. It does a double help there in terms of it takes away your anxiety and it helps you sleep. Right. Taking a certain... Now, I'm not a prescriber. I'm not a medical professional. Never take anything I'm saying as such or any of the rest of us. Talk to a prescriber about all these kinds of things. The mother took so to answer your questions, Berto, the color of the pill, I don't know. The pill looked a little suspicious, but I don't know. Maybe benzos did look like that and did have consistent casings over time. I suspect not, but who knows?
I did get the sense that even if they did, it was highly convenient for the show to not have to keep explaining, what is she taking right now? What is she taking right now?
And it was a very distinctive color too.
Yeah.
Also, yes, they did give these pills out very readily during the time, including to kids. And if you have a bunch of unruly kids in an institution, one of the ways you can cope with it, and they do that even to this day to some extent, and we saw this in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was also accurate, of if you just drug people up, then, your job is a lot easier, right? Especially if you can force people to take a particular medication, right?
Right.
So I couldn't find any specific reports on specific orphanages that gave benzos to kids, but by no means would I consider that to be strange. So the mother took it too, which has been very documented at the time. Have you heard of Mother's Little Helper? Have either of you heard of that phrase?
I have, yeah.
So there's even a Rolling Stones song about this called Mother's Little Helper.
There is?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And it's very explicit. So in the 60s, it was widely understood that in the United States and in the Western world that a lot of women were taking benzos on a daily basis. They were taking either Librium or Valium. Valium was the real famous one. In fact, it was the top-selling pharmaceutical in the United States for 13 years, from 1969 until 1982.
Whoa.
Yeah, so
until Viagra came out or something?
Yeah, I don't know what the top-selling... I'm guessing SSRIs are in there somewhere. Yeah. But very, very popular drug. I can't remember the exact stat, but something like 80% of prescriptions or something were written in psychiatric medications. 80% or some really high number of prescriptions were for benzodiazepines because they didn't really understand how they were better than barbiturates. You might have heard of barbiturates. In fact, do you remember from Wolf of Wall Street when they get really messed up? That's because they actually had a barbiturate, and you remember them talking about it like, how'd you get your hands on that stuff? Because they had made it illegal or difficult to get your hands on.
Yep.
And that drug had a lot of problems with it. But it was a similar thing. It was for anxiety that would help people, but it had a lot of other issues with it. And so when benzodiazepines came along, it was like, oh, all the positives with none of the negatives. But it was just in relation to barbiturates, there were still problems, and there are problems with benzodiazepines. Obviously, you can become addicted. You can have withdrawal symptoms. Jordan Peterson, you might know, became addicted to benzodiazepines. Do you know Jordan Peterson, Collin?
I don't.
So he's a famous, I don't know what you call him, a podcaster who...
Author.
Yeah, who is, I don't know, he some consider him to be, alt-right sort of person. But anyway, he recently came out saying that he went into recovery for addiction from benzodiazepines. He sought treatment in Russia, I believe.
In Russia, yeah. It was extreme treatment.
Yeah. And according to him, the withdrawal from the benzo. So as he was taking benzos all the time. He says in response to his wife being diagnosed with terminal cancer, and then he was so anxious that he was taking benzos every day or very frequently, and then a lot of psychiatric symptoms happened to him, where he started to have all these brain problems. I don't know. Yeah. There are common ones, like you can have seizures or other kinds of things, but and then he stopped taking them, and the withdrawal was so terrible they had to induce a coma for him, given how bad his symptoms were. And now, after, I don't know, months after he has managed to get sober, he's still, according to him, in a constant state of anxiety, and he can't stop moving. He has to constantly pace and move and do gestures, and he says he's in constant hell because of what benzodiazepines did to him. So
sucks.
Yeah. So at the time, they didn't know that. they hadn't done the research or something, and they were just handing these things out like it was candy, and a lot of women were taking it. And the sociological aspect to Mother's Little Helper, where it was, you have in the 70s a lot of women who are feeling oppressed, obviously, by sexism, and you have a lot of abuse that's happening, and women are not allowed to do anything with their lives oftentimes. And so a lot of suffering women from society and from misogyny and from abuse and from being treated horribly. And they go to the doctor and they're like, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
And then the doctor's like, and an old white guy is like, okay, little lady, take a pill. And
chill pill.
And usually that would work, And,
is that where the term chill pill came from?
Yeah, I mean, it is a chill pill. It definitely chills you out. So that's what Mother's Little Helper comes from, is mainly from Valium, but also when you hear Xanax or you hear Librium or this medication that's in the movie, I think that is benzodiazepines. So anything more in the meds before we move on here to other psychological
one question I have is, what is the role what is the interplay between them and alcohol?
Right.
Because the mom also drank a lot, and so did she.
Yeah, in the series, she dies of liver problems, is what they said, or hepatitis, because hepatitis caused her liver problems. But and I sort of like this about the series, is that they didn't really explain things a lot. They didn't go into. They gave just enough detail where you're like, okay, that's possible. Yeah. But they didn't give so much detail where you're like, well, I don't know. But yeah, if you take too many benzos, your heart will stop, because benzodiazepines have an effect on the brain that causes essentially a neurotransmitter to be released such that everything slows down, including your breathing and your heart rate. And alcohol does the same. If you drink a lot of alcohol, your breathing will stop and your heart will stop. Or you'll be so relaxed that vomit will come up and you'll suffocate while you're sleeping. Well, benzodiazepines and alcohol essentially do the same thing. And so when you drink and take benzos, say you're like, well, normally I take 2 benzos, and normally I drink half a bottle of wine or something. Well, you take them at the same time, boom, now you have a problem. And that happens more than it should, because people need to know about it. And of course, always talk with your prescriber about such things.
And it gets out of control very easily. I have a family member who's dealing with that too. And I guess in order to kind of keep confidentiality, I don't know how much I can actually reveal, but you mentioned earlier that oftentimes heroin becomes involved when the access is denied. And that's totally the case. And it doesn't just stop with the person affected, it affects the whole family dynamic. And that family dynamic extends into all other family dynamics in the larger family. network. So yeah, it's incredibly devastating when the consumption gets out of control.
Right. Because the person is ashamed of their use and they hide it, and that it feels bad to everyone, including the person suffering from addiction and the people being lied to. The individual will likely be intoxicated to the point where it's hard to interface with them. They might also drop the ball a lot because they're either intoxicated and they can't follow through with promises, or they're too focused on getting the substance because it's hard to get enough because your tolerance goes up. So, and then to watch someone just waste away or watch someone almost die, these are very painful to families. And these things can be very, very powerful addictive substances, habit-forming substances. I mean, you look at someone like Jordan Peterson, who's a psychologist and a professor at Yale, and no matter what you think about his politics, he's an intelligent dude,
right?
Who doesn't mess around with things that other people would, not a lot of people are going to look at him and say like, well, that's a dumb person, that's
and
an unintelligent.
His time during the days and stuff,
Yeah, and yet he also had developed a massive problem, and he knew better, right? There's no possible way that, I don't know, but I'm quite sure he knew he was playing with fire, and he did anyway because of how much suffering he was going through. Sometimes it's the only answer, and you're better. You're thinking, well, today, this is the only way I'm going to get through the day, and then you fast forward a couple of years, and you're down a hole.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was super hard, actually, as I was watching the show. All the scenes where she was relying on the drugs, or then she started drinking heavily, because I just kept, it's so relatable in the sense of that poor little child just was not given the proper, initial starts in so many ways, and just the mess that must have been in her head constantly. And then, of course, she didn't know how to really maintain friendship. She didn't really know proper boundaries. She didn't know almost anything about being a quote unquote normal integrated person. And so, of course it made sense. Of course, you got to go to the bottle. You got to go to the pills. So painful.
Yeah, I kind of like that about the series, and I wish they would have done a little bit more, but maybe that's just me trying to make things psychological, and it would have been boring to watch. But I wished, to me, I don't know if this is how you read it, but we have this sort of difficult childhood that's referenced kind of vaguely. We know that there were difficulties when she was growing up. We don't know the nature of it, but we see problems. At least what we're shown are problems, but we could imagine that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the. And then we see her later on as really distant and very cold, and when push comes to shove, she runs away. You see that she doesn't relate to people very effectively, shall we say. And what that results in is her being alone a lot, and her turning to the bottle and her pills a lot. Did you see that when you were watching? Was that the narrative that you were pulling away, Collin?
Yeah, I kept thinking attachment disorder, because the bits we got through the little backstory scenes, as well as like the origin story of her mom trying to kill at least herself, probably both of them, was that her mom had big psychological issues that were not seemingly being addressed. And then her dad was maybe not really there. Maybe he tried. We're not really sure. And then her mom tries to kill them both. And then she's at an orphanage with people that are maybe by necessity coolly detached. So I just kept thinking, man, she's got no role models, no examples of this is how you form a relationship. This is how you trust someone. This is how you. Anyways, it was.
Yeah, and
painful.
To just modify your nomenclature a little bit of not attachment disorder, but attachment injury is more accurate.
Okay, attachment injury.
Yeah, and the mom, I was looking real closely. It's unclear if she had any mental disorder. I know that's kind of how she's portrayed because she seems unhinged in the series, but there was nothing in the way of symptoms that I saw. You clearly get this idea that she doesn't make good choices, but there wasn't anything in there where it was like schizophrenia or something else. Like there wasn't any indication.
Well, but hold on, because what we know of her is she was super smart. She was a professor or something, or she was.
Yeah, she wrote a dissertation on math, I think it was.
On math, yeah, she was a mathematician. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And so super smart and stuff like this. And then she becomes so dysfunctional that they live in a weird, dilapidated trailer. And then this leads to her trying to kill both of them.
Yeah, but that's not in the DSM, what you just described. I
remember reading that chapter, though.
Yeah, someone who used to be a mathematician but now lives in a trailer and then tries to kill themselves. There's nothing in you could use that as like a jumping off point for a pretty detailed assessment from that point. But I liked that too, honestly. I liked that it was ambiguous. It wasn't clear what her problem was. They didn't really try to explain that, which was a theme of the whole series, which I kind of liked. They didn't overly explain things. Collin, what was your take on Beth's trauma, and when you see her as an adult interacting with people, did you get the sense that she was afraid of other people because of her past and she would turn to substances and chess to cope with it?
Well, something I think that meant a lot to me when I was watching it was how angry she seemed to be, and how when she was playing chess, there was always this this intense frustration that, especially when you see her earlier games, even though she's quite talented, you can always feel that anger. And when she starts to lose, that face changes, and the actress was really wonderful at portraying that. But it meant a lot to me because I've been reading this book with a book club, the one I mentioned earlier, the Gay Man's Mindfulness Collective, called The Velvet Rage. And it's from a gay man's perspective about the gay experience of having trauma that is unresolved and then coping with it by becoming successful, by having sex, by seeking validation from others. And I latched on to the moments where she realized that her adopted mom was going to benefit from her joy of chess, and there was going to be a monetary extension to her passion. And I wonder if, and again, I'm talking story, not necessarily plot, because I think that in order for the story to be super clear, the plot had to be a little vague. So I can only speculate on an artistic level that they're trying to set up a story for our lead character where she's on a trajectory at the beginning to become like the mom, where she's all success, all intellect, and no system for connection. And throughout the course of the story, she's faced with obstacles that either detract from her ability to connect because she uses external things to numb herself. And it's not just the drugs. We see her looking at magazines and copying hairstyles, getting clothes to appear a certain way. In other words, she's trying to control people's perception of her and present this physical success, embody success, so that she's not vulnerable. And so I don't know about her trauma, but it seemed like there was an emphasis placed on her inability to be vulnerable. And so I think that was kind of my biggest connect with her.
Right. And again, not super overt, but was clear over the 7 episodes or so that, especially from my perspective, when I'm looking at how people write characters like this, that she had a quiet rage, as you were pointing out, and a quiet desperation that she learned to suppress and would occasionally kind of sneak out, but then she would quickly pull away. There are these little moments when she's with Benny or whatever, and he kind of hurts her feelings a little bit, and then she just like, okay, fine, and then she just turns away, and she's just like, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And I didn't like you either, kind of a thing. And then more alcohol, more drugs, more chess, and so that I thought that was done in a subtle way that didn't feel cheesy to me.
And there was this huge story arc moment when there were a lot of people that actually didn't injure her that bad, or maybe sometimes not at all yet, that she fully like sideswiped or cut off, but Benny, is it?
I think that was it.
Benny was Thomas Brody Sangster.
Yeah, he actually goes hardcore and draws a line for himself, which I was proud of him. He's like, no, you were mean to me, you were rude, whatever, so no, I'm done with you. And I mean, I thought, based on her previous character, that would have given her the perfect excuse to be done with him and just like, well, But instead, there was that awesome growth moment where she still reaches back out to him and she sort of like acknowledges that maybe he was right. And that was great.
Yeah.
And that made that scene down the road where both of the men who she didn't really love, maybe had infatuation with, but wasn't truly connected to, and she pursued sex and relationships with them anyway, they ended up being there for her at the end. I actually cried when they were on the phone. And just the sense of support that they knew that she needed. And I think that was a really beautiful moment to show, because I remember her saying, maybe it was to her friend from the orphanage, I don't remember which character this was directed at, but she says, yeah, I do break people's hearts. Or she affirms somebody that says, oh, yeah, his heart was maybe a little broken. She's like, yep, I tend to do that. And in that moment, I think she needed to see that people will be there for her and for her success, not because they're getting something from it, not because she then has to have sex with them in order to validate their connection. Connections can just be. And also talking about her friend from the orphanage, I think the selflessness of her actions really taught her a lot. And it was truly special to see a young female character have to build up their morals and to reevaluate exactly what they value, because oftentimes you see young ingenue actresses portraying characters who either are super good or super bad, and sure, maybe there's growth, but they don't often have literally no idea what is right and wrong for them or for others. And to see her develop that was actually quite exquisite, in my opinion.
Yeah, it just occurred to me as you're saying that this is kind of like the 2020 version of Legally Blonde or something. Oh,
I love that.
Yeah, where you have a kind of fish out of water, underclass woman in a man's world, succeeding with help of her friends.
Yeah.
And but just done in a very 2020 David Fincher-esque way.
By the way, was that a reveal about the chess world? Does it? I never thought about it that way. Like when they adjourn for the day, do they go and consult? Do they get help? And then I realized,
of course,
yeah.
Yeah.
But it seemed like, oh no, isn't that cheating or something?
Well, they basically implied that he adjourned really early.
Yeah.
And she looks up at him, she's going on in the championship. She looks up like, what are you talking about? We're in the middle of the match.
Right.
But both of them get the advantage of being able to consult afterwards.
Yeah. I just didn't realize that was a thing. I always thought naively like, no, they just, sit there and think about it.
Right. So let's talk about sexism. 3 dudes talking about sexism.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
Let me crack open my beer.
Nothing better than that. So what did you observe? Well, maybe a more sophisticated question is, what did you think of how sexism was depicted, Collin, in this movie, in this series?
Well, actually, before I respond to that, I love that you just called it a movie. Because I really do think this is an 8-hour-long movie, and it didn't even have the the opening credits to kind of break up that mysticism. So yeah, I totally agree. Felt like a movie.
Yeah.
And I would say that the movie was absolutely perfect when it came to its depiction of what a woman would go through. And the reason that I think it was perfect is because they allowed for variance and they didn't strike bold strokes. They weren't everything related to, they didn't take the avenue of everything related to success and separating from men and not engaging with your community or having family. That's wrong, and what is right is like dedicating yourself to a career and to your own passion and having that drive. It allowed for the nuance of a character who desperately wanted to build a family, even though that's not what the story is about, so they don't focus on it that much. She wants connection, she wants stability, and I think she wants to build that for herself, so those things are connected. So everything that she's doing with her chess playing and trying to figure out how to not... It doesn't just become, this is the sports movie about becoming the best chess player, period. It's become the best chess player and have a life. And figure out how to incorporate that into an experience that you are a part of. And that's why at the end, where she's walking down on the street and seeing all of the old geezers playing chess, she has found both. She's found self-fulfillment and she's also found community. She knows who her people are. And I think that the other female characters in the story help highlight that nuance. For example, the adopted mother I thought was a really well-written character because she's not wholly tragic, even though she is a tragic character. We see her represent a kind of response to joy that I do believe was helpful for our lead to learn from and to experience in the short time that she was able to. She's got obviously problems, but she's also a beautiful piano player. And yet she had stage fright. And I think there's a lot more there. I think that she had developed a narrative for herself that said, I cannot. I am a part of this system. But that's part of what makes the story great, because we're able to see how things can change for women who are like our protagonist or her adopted mom. Because maybe her generation didn't so much have the access to pursue piano if it wasn't in their destiny as put forth to them by, the patriarchy or the men in their life. Whereas we see Harmon, even though it certainly wasn't, she didn't come into it with privilege, she's able to claim that for herself. And this is even a period piece. So we see how that was in the 60s, and it just makes you more optimistic for how things are going to change in terms of our gender dynamics in the future.
I forget what you said. What was your rating?
I gave it an 8.
Even 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that was out there because I don't remember. But yeah, at the very end, I don't know if this was on purpose, but it felt very much like a Mary Tyler Moore moment when she was walking through the streets, because she has that coat on and that hat on, and she had a skip in her step, just like Mary Tyler Moore did when she walked down the streets of where she lived, Cleveland or something. I can't remember where she lived, but it was not New York, I don't think, and it wasn't L.A. Anyway, point is that I don't know if they meant that on purpose, but it felt that way to me anyway.
And she finds her community.
Yeah.
By the way, one thing that struck me, I've certainly seen it before, but it was portrayed really well, really drearily, but well. The way they showed how like the husband is just like, he has his own little world. He's not to be bothered when he's reading his newspaper. Food better be ready. The wife is like there. It's like an attachment. It's part of the furniture.
Right.
But the real life happens for him. He goes, he travels, he works so hard. He's too stressed to be bothered with mundane
and she
things.
talks so much. That was
Yeah,
his
she
big
talks.
complaint. All she did was talk all the time. Yeah.
It's so sad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I'm of two minds of this production on sexism. On one hand, I agree with everything you're saying because I think it's it shows the patriarchy. It shows Mother's Little Helper. It shows the sexism in the chess world. It gives us as the viewer her perspective. So when she walks into the chess room and there's one woman in there and she's paired up with her, you just
Right.
immediately get this sense of like they're shoved aside, and we get it from her perspective, and all the boys are, these privileged white boys, that are the norm, and then they're the weirdos because they're the girls, and they're expected to lose, and they just placate them. Like, they didn't say this outright in the beginning. It was just like, you're not going to play him, you're not ranked, and you're a girl. You know what I mean? This kind of thing. So it was really throughout the whole production. But the other mind I have is that, in a sense, and it would be a different production if they did this, they pulled some punches on sexism, I think. Because not that sexism was a monolith, not that society was a monolith back then. But there were moments when I thought there would have been more overt sexism and more overt people saying, you can't lose to this person. She's a woman. You lost to a woman. You are a loser, or people trying to intimidate her, because the men back then, sexism affects everyone, right? So for the men back then, they would have been given so many messages that if you lose, it's bad. But if you lose to a woman, then you might as well just be a woman. You know what I mean?
Turn in your men card.
Yeah, it's like being beat up by a woman. It's one thing to be beat up by a dude, but to be beat up by a woman, then wow. And so I felt like there were moments where I thought, I feel like everyone's kind of subtly, the way that 2020, I felt like it felt like a 2020 version of background sexism. In the 60s and the late 50s, I mean, it was overt. It was intense, the sexism that was going on back then. In some ways,
I think it was intense. I think it was intense in the context of the story. I think it comes down to the way that it was written, because there aren't as many scenes that directly relate to what we associate as sexist behavior that is like obviously sexist behavior, but it comes out in little things like the way that they have girls be, or the values they're trying to give the little girls at the orphanage, or whenever they're focusing so highly on the fact that as a chess player who's so good, she's a girl. It's a girl that's really good at this chess game, and I think that part of the writing was done in that way so that modern audiences who are watching this can go, yeah, I'm still dealing with that. Like, I still get that. Whenever I get straight A's in my family, I'm the girl that got straight A's. And so I think that was kind
about that, Collin. I got on a debate about that, though, because I actually don't. I think it's unavoidable to point out deviations from a norm, and it would have absolutely been mind-blowing and the talk of the town at that time for this story to happen in actuality. So I actually don't think that, I guess you could say, well, there should be just as many women chess grandmasters as men. It's like, maybe, but the point is that there weren't. So clearly that would have stuck out. So clearly they would have said, wait, you're a girl? But I think it's true, like the more I think about it, that there were moments where, and maybe it's because they were chess players, so they were already sort of on the nerdy side of the fence and on the maybe smarter side of the fence, so maybe they were more okay with what was happening there. But I am actually, as you're mentioning, Kirk, wondering, wait a minute, why would they be like walking out of there? Wouldn't they be like, how did you cheat?
Right.
Who's helping you?
Right. That would have been more prevalent, I think. Now, who knows? Because there's a lot of variation. Like I said, we tend to look back in the past and say, like, it's all one thing. And could this story have happened exactly as it did? Absolutely. Yeah, if this was a documentary and there was just cameras around, it could have looked like that. So I'm not saying it's impossible that it happened, but as I was watching it, I felt like it was almost too happy of a story. Like, there were moments where I thought, well, those guys there'd probably be something sprinkled in there, like when, even at the end, when they're helping her out, it wouldn't be weird for one of the guys to say something like, well, she only won because we helped her because we're guys. You know what I mean? At least for them to think something like that. Now, of course, that would ruin the ending, and I cried too at the ending, by the way, which surprised me. Honestly, I was kind of like, I didn't expect to cry in this production.
But Kirk, hold on, because I don't disagree with you. Like I'm gonna go watch a mother movie or something, but the show was so sad at the beginning, and there was so much bad stuff that happened that you kind of have to try to balance it out a little.
Totally, and I get that, but as I was watching, that's why I say I'm of two minds. As I was watching it, I was like, the sexism theme was definitely felt throughout the whole 7 episodes. I definitely felt it almost in every scene. When she was interacting with anyone, I definitely got a sense like sexism was an aura in that room around everything, whether it was overtly occurring or subtly, or even just, well, we all know that you're a lowly woman kind of a thing, so we don't need to do anything about it. But at the same time, I kept waiting for there to be it to happen more often, and have it crop up in people that you wouldn't want it to, like with Benny or with Harry or something, where they might say, so why are you even playing chess? You should be like getting married and having kids, because that was the way they saw things back then. And it wouldn't be weird for a nice guy like Benny or a nice guy like Harry to suggest, maybe you should just find a man, and maybe you should just, I felt like it was a 2020 kind of lens on that time, because if you depicted that, I think what I would consider to be accurate of the time, me watching, I'd be like, well, I still like Harry and Benny, but they're a product of 1967. Like, that's how everyone was back then. But in a 2020 version, if you put that in there, the audience would hate those characters. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that was just of my 2 minds. Rotten Tomatoes, reviewers and audience score. Berto, what do you think?
Reviewers gave it a 90%, and audience gave it an 88.
What do you think, Collin?
I was actually going to guess 90, so to vary it up, I'll go 85, and then for critic, and then I'll do 75 for audience.
You went the wrong direction. 99% critic, 95% audience.
Wow!
This is one of the highest rated things on Rotten Tomatoes of all time.
Okay, that's a little extreme.
So why do you think that is? Because, y'all gave it 8, I gave it 7. I liked it for sure.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't put, I could maybe give it an 8, but I found myself enjoying it for sure. And there weren't really boring moments, but I wasn't like, oh my God, there weren't moments like that really for me. I thought it was a very pleasant, enjoyable, entertaining watch, but it didn't move me to the core the way that it would need to in order for me to give it like a 9 or a 10. But why do you think it's so off the charts for everyone else?
Well, okay, so I don't know why it's so off the charts, honestly. Well, no, I have a couple ideas, but first let me defend my 8 and why I didn't go 9, for example. Like,
defend your 8.
I'm gonna defend my 8. Like, okay, to me, first of all, it looked beautiful.
Yeah.
It just looked great, and the music and the visuals were so entertaining by themselves.
Yeah.
She was very fun to watch.
Yeah.
And the little girl too, like everyone they cast in her role, like it was just so entertaining to watch. There were so many scenes that I think I will remember for a long time. So they're iconic in that sense. Like when she's first encountering the basement and the janitor, and you get this contrast of like the quote unquote dumb janitor is actually really good at chess, and how like he becomes sort of like a surrogate father. And there's that scene where they take the photo and they don't show us what the photo looks like until the end. I just, those kinds of things I thought were so well written and directed. And even though they didn't, which actually I would have liked, but I realized would have been boring, they didn't like sit there and show me every little move in the games. But I did love the little bits of chessness in it. I've always been, fascinated by games and chess, of course, being such an iconic thing. And so because of all that, I give it an 8. I didn't go 9 because I guess, and this is to your point, in the end, it did follow sort of a straight path. There wasn't anything that surprising about it. Certainly at the beginning of the show, you get the sense, oh, she's going to be a child, or she's going to be a chess prodigy. And she is. And then you get the sense like, oh, she's eventually going to triumph. And she does. And so everything gets introduced and then you kind of see where it's going. And it does. So from that perspective, I certainly was never like, oh, I can't believe they did that. But at the same time, I was thoroughly entertained.
Yeah. What about you, Collin? Defend your 8.
Well, I think that there's an exquisite craftsmanship behind it. I think if you look at the piece, the actual mechanics of the filmmaking are quite exceptional. So right down to the costumes that they had the lead character in, they actually gave her different silhouettes to signify where she was along her journey. So she slowly, and it covered so many years of this woman's life, and obviously the actress did not progress that many years, but because of the way that they designed her and also with her performance, you felt like you were watching her over the course of 10 years, more than 10 years. So that was pretty, mind-boggling to me. It didn't seem like they were using any special effects or makeup or anything like that to kind of get a cheap effect of age. But beyond that, the emotional focus of the piece, I think, is resolute. So you mentioned that you thought there would be more scenes of sexism, more like the reality, which I agree, it would have been the reality. It probably would have been, she would have dealt with that a lot more. However, the story is, I think, more about her finding out what the right connections are for her. And so that's why the interactions that she has with the main male characters have to be what they are. And so as she's first going from, the guy who was Dudley in Harry Potter, I forgot his name.
Did you know that was Dudley, Berto?
I didn't while I was watching. I kept looking at him going like, why does he look sort of familiar?
Yeah.
But I couldn't place him. And then someone was like, you know who that is? And I'm like, no. And when I found out, my mind was blown.
Yeah.
And then now I can't unsee him, but
right. You won't be able to. So, and you've got the, him, and then you go to the kid that's now grown up from Love Actually, and then finally
Jojen Reed from Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, yeah. That one I did know. I was very familiar with that one.
Right. So it's kind of you see these exquisitely crafted stages of relationships where she has no idea what to seek with the first. She's figuring out what she wants, but she doesn't know how to seek it with the second. And by the third, she's found a way to at least ask for what she needs, even if she doesn't always know about what to do exactly to get it. And those combine with the script to match her progress in chess, where she starts by playing basically herself, where she's got it all in her head that she's going to win and she's the best, and she doesn't have to consider the other player as much. Then by the second, when she gets to the middle leagues, as it were, she's feeling out, okay, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe this perfection that I've invented for myself is a little bit false. Then even that, doesn't complete the picture, which is great because even as we develop, it's never really the end of the story. And so I loved that they kind of tracked her on this journey where we know even by the end of it, even though she's found herself in a way, she still has a long way to go. So I thought that the visual representation of that was flawless. The reason I didn't give it a 9 or a 10 is because there wasn't the X factor, I guess, like you said, that made it one of my undeniable favorites. Everything was working, and I couldn't deny that it wasn't working, and I had a great emotional journey with it, but some reason it didn't land, and I think that maybe it has something to do with the repetition of shots, because a lot of it is people playing chess. There's a lot of just eye contact and very subtle gestures and the moving of pieces, which is fascinating for a time, but at the end of the day, even if it makes total sense for the script and supports the thesis of the narrative, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Which is an 8, which is very high.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And if I were a woman, I think I would give it a 9 or a 10 because, or put it another way, if this was an Asian American, I probably would have given it a 9 or a 10 because it would have been finally representation in a movie like this. So I would speculate that a lot of the really high ratings are because women are watching this and saying they're feeling what we feel when we watch things like, you know, the countless, you know, art forms that are geared towards men, right? And get us going. And so like I said, if this was like an Asian American, like if it was a half Asian boy who was being discriminated against and managed to, you know, become the best chess champion in the world, I probably would have given this a 10 out of 10 because I would have been on the edge of my seat feeling like there's a hero that represents me. There's a hero that and especially if they had little half Japanese kind of things sprinkled out through the show. And so for women, I'm wondering if this just feels like finally a hero that I can feel like is someone that I can relate to, right?
Okay, so here's what I want to see, because one of my favorite books of all time is Contact. And although you could draw some similarities, because in Contact, the heroine is a female and she's, sort of in a field of mostly men and stuff like this, there is something subtly different. When we watch a movie and like the good guy, like the hero is a dude and he happens to be really good at kung fu, or maybe he's just like the best spy, or he's the best doctor or something. Like, we don't watch it and go, finally a guy is the best at something, right?
Right.
And I feel like we fall in this trap a lot with minorities and with women and stuff. Like, for example, you see Black Widow in the Marvel Avengers movies and stuff. Oh, finally a woman can also kick ass with it. And I feel that it's a little sad, right? Because what I want to see, I don't need to see a woman that can finally do what a guy can do. You know, like, I want to see women being the heroes in stories, and they just happen to be the hero of that story. And they are good at what they're good at, and they succeed in the end. But it wasn't like, finally, it wasn't like, oh, it's because it was just, she was the hero in this story. And it's an evolution, right? And it's the same with minorities.
So
like,
let me clarify. So you're saying this production didn't seem forced or tokenized as a woman?
No, I'm actually saying that this one in particular is, but I understand why. Like, it's a period piece. It's something that is unusual.
You're saying that Queen's Gambit is tokenization.
It is tokenized
in the same way that Pepper swoops in at the end of Endgame.
Yeah,
is that
I don't
what
think
you're
it's
saying?
written that way.
Yes, that's what I'm. No. I'm not trying to put it down at all. I'm just saying this. We have been watching movies for a century, and when we watch the movies, 99% of them, there's some dude who's the best at something, and he wins in the end. And none of us ever go, finally a white dude is good at something. We never do that. So I want to see more movies where it's just the hero happens to be a Colombian, a Japanese person, a woman, a gay person. But it's not because of that or about that or anything. It's just that's what they are. And it's just like one of the many descriptors. Describe the hero in this movie. Oh, well, let's see. They're 5'6". They describe themselves as bisexual.
Well,
they're a woman.
two things. I mean, yes, in a perfect world, that would be the world we'd live in, because we wouldn't have 100 years of sexism in film. So, but that's what we've been given. One, two. If you're gonna make a story about a woman playing chess and winning in any era, sexism is going to be part of the story.
Absolutely.
But
the reason
we can't get away from that. You know what I mean?
I understand that. The reason I was using Contact as an example is when you read that book, there are some moments where it's like, well, I'm a woman, but that's not what that story is about. She's a badass. She's a badass astronomer. She's the hero. But you read it, it's an enjoyable story.
I feel like Queen's Gambit actually sought to and succeeded to do that, which
I agree.
I think I'm failing at my point, because you guys think I'm sort of like attacking it.
No,
and I'm not. I think it was fantastic.
Well, maybe
I just want to see shows and movies that are not about the exception to the rule. I just want to see women as heroes.
But how? Because given the fact that anytime you make a movie where there's a minority or anything other than a white male, white cis hetero male, American usually, that is not the hero, it feels weird, because it
won't
is
feel
weird.
weird after 1,000 of them, after 1,000,000 of them.
Right. But the first few, even if you make them not like, you just roll dice and you're just like, well, let's just see what gender. But even if you're just rolling dice, like, we're not going to make this about a woman. We're just going to make this about a person. And let's roll dice and just, okay, it happens to be a woman. Okay, fine. And then you make that movie. Well, as you're making it, as the audience is watching it, it's going to feel very weird just because of the history of film and of our culture.
I know. We just got to do more of it, and that way it won't feel weird.
Yeah.
But there are only so many Schitt's Creeks that... Okay, I just wanted to draw a little bit of a comparison between Queen's Gambit and Schitt's Creek. So there might be a Schitt's Creek episode coming out soon. Look out for that. I don't know. Kirk has to finish it. But anyway, so I love both. But one of them is, like Kirk is talking about, and like we're all very aware, I'm not trying to mansplain or anything. It takes place in the 60s, a particular period in time. And Schitt's Creek is like a utopic, now Canadian. I mean, I know it's not. It was filmed in Canada. But the gayness of Schitt's Creek is very much an afterthought. There are gay characters and pan characters, and there's a very famous fabulous gay wedding. I guess that's a spoiler, sorry. Somebody gay and pan get married, but or bi and pan. Anyway, whatever, there's a queer wedding, and it's not talked about. There's not a lot of heteronormative ideas they have to jump over. There's not a lot of blatant scenes of homophobia. There's not really any talk about, no one even mentions AIDS. That was so refreshing. It felt great, but I think the story had the agency to be that because of the context of where it was set. It was like a contained universe. And so I think that this show really handled it the best possible way, because they didn't hide it, but they also, I think, did exactly what you're wanting, Berto, and they made it just about a chess player. I really do think
I fully disagree with this. That part I fully disagree, because all the emphasis and all the talk online was about just like, the
talk online.
Grandmaster.
Yeah, but that's the talk. But you could argue, and I think that it would be valid to say this is more about an orphan or a traumatized person who rose the ranks.
There is that, but come on.
Or someone suffering from
impossible.
addiction, a complicated character who found strength in some very mundane ways, and had a talent. You know what I mean? Say you made this about a boy, it wouldn't have altered the story fundamentally, I don't think. You could have made this about a boy, and it would have had similar beats to it, No,
I mean, come on, man. What would have been weird about a boy who happens to be a genius who plays chess?
Well, he's an orphan. No one wants
He's
him.
addicted to
Yeah,
substances.
he
has trauma.
Yeah, he's been
You
traumatized.
guys are wanting it both ways. You want it to be a good movie about a woman being a hero, and at the same time, it's not about a woman. I don't think so. Like, here's what I want to see. There's a movie. There's a pandemic. There's a doctor. The doctor's a woman. She's great at it. She's one of the best at, but she's the hero, and that's it.
Yeah,
I want to see a movie where there's a woman who's
a
like
lot of people
works for the
say,
government.
But I want to put a caveat on what you're saying. A lot of misogynistic, out of touch people say what you're saying. I know you're not meaning it this way, but a lot of people do. When white males, and you're not white, but males, when they watch movies and they see what seems to be tokenization or what seems to be celebration of this other thing, and for the male, they're watching it and they're like, this wasn't that big of a deal, but man, are women going crazy over this? I mean, come on, like, we need to move past this. Because it feels hostile towards white men. If you listen to women going like, finally, a story about a woman who like manages to break through the glass ceiling, it looked at a certain way, it can feel hostile to men. It'd be like,
I think you're completely missing it. Erin Brockovich was a fantastic movie. I liked it better than this. I gave it probably a 9, maybe 9.5. That's a woman breaking through. But it's also a story about a lawyer doing great stuff. So in my mind, the tokenization level was actually lower, which is weird. I guess I liken this one to if we saw a movie about like the best female power lifter and she beats all the men or something, which would be great, but it's also very tokenized. I want to see movies about heroes, and not just women, heroes that happen to be humans that are not always the same cookie cutter human. And I want to see more of them, millions, so that we no longer have to be like, oh, finally a movie about, like.
But let me ask you just one question, yes or no. What you're saying right now, is that a criticism of this show or not?
No, I love this show.
You just have a wish.
Sad.
This is just a wish.
This is like an exception to a rule.
Yeah.
But
okay.
there is
It's
a
sad.
clap back. I think there is a movement. Did y'all watch season 2 of The Boys?
Yes.
Not yet. No.
Didn't like it.
Well, I don't think this is a spoiler, but there's this this corporate image. They add another woman to the team. That woman, there's spoilers abound in terms of who she is.
Yeah.
But there's a corporatization of the feminist agenda and the gay agenda, where the Vought actually weaponizes it to get support. They brand the bisexual as a lesbian,
By
and
the way,
sell
that's
her.
not in the comic books at all.
Oh shit!
So ironic. So this is sort of an example of what I'm talking about. In order to like diversify, they made the main bad guy, who in the comics is a dude, they made it a woman. Well, but now you have like a woman
talking about
bad
Stormfront?
guy. I'm talking about the first episode, the first season.
Oh, okay.
Like
Talking about Elizabeth Shue?
in the comic
Yeah,
books,
Elizabeth Shue.
Elizabeth Shue's character was a dude, and he was horrible. He was evil. And then they made it a woman. Okay, we got diversity, but the diversity is like a bad character, like a bad. They couldn't make Huey a woman. They couldn't make the main good guy, Butcher, a woman. They had to make like the bad. Anyways,
Well, so I don't understand
I think
that.
it's the
What's
wrong direction when you go that way.
What's the right direction?
The right direction is let's make more and more movies with a variety of humans that are the heroes of the story.
So if you made The Boys, all of them girls.
No, I wouldn't make The Boys. I would copy the comic book almost verbatim. But don't stop there. Make new stories.
Make new stories.
Yeah. Why do
Okay.
we have to just remake things? Let's make new stories. 'Cause the problem with remaking is every story written up until now is primarily some white dudes doing stuff. Why don't we write new stories?
Yeah. Well, that's what this Queen's Gambit is trying to
Yes,
do.
and I applaud it. I want a billion more where it's not even weird. It's just another story with a great hero.
Yeah, totally.
All right, let's take a break. When we get back, I will go through my normal list of likes and don't likes. What do you say, guys?
Let's do it.
Hey, deserving listeners, as you know, I'm constantly recommending that people go to therapy. We all need therapy from time to time. One of the options available that is definitely worth checking out is BetterHelp.com. So if you're looking for a therapist, I would give it a try by going to BetterHelp.com/Kirk. Make sure you use the /Kirk because you get 10% off your first month and it helps us out. I get a lot of emails from you saying that you're looking for a therapist. As you watch these videos, I know many of you have been motivated to find your own therapist, but I know it can be really hard to find a good one to work with. Like I said, one of the options available to try is betterhelp.com/Kirk. And you should know that this service is available to clients worldwide, which is amazing. I've been told that you can start communicating with your therapist in under 24 hours. You can message with your counselor anytime. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. And I've been told that it's often less expensive than in-person therapy. So go to betterhelp.com/Kirk to get 10% off your first month of therapy today. So, Berto, if Collin was trying to be funny and he was trying to make people be a patron, what would he sound like?
He would say something like this. Hello, my name is Collin. I am trying a joke on you in order for you to become patrons of this here podcast. Now, because I'm trying a joke, I'm setting it up first, which will require some setup. But once it's set up, you will see the structure in it, and the final payoff will be glorious. Are we out of time? Oops.
I don't sound like that.
I might have been thinking of Collin from wasn't it? What was the name of the little peg leg kid in the Christmas Carol?
Wasn't that little Tim? Tiny
Little
Tim?
Tim. Collin, Tim, all these names, blend together for me.
You can go with the kid, the obnoxious kid from the second Harry Potter that was taking pictures like a weirdo of everybody.
Colin Creevey. You're right.
I'm Colin Creevey.
You're
I'm
Colin Creevey.
Gryffindor.
And then there's Colin Firth. So all these blend together for me.
Oh, I like him. That's fine.
Okay, my list of likes. I liked that we had a complicated woman character, although I wish she was more complicated. That would have upped my enjoyment of this. I felt like her complications was welcomed, but I felt like her complications... So I'm going to piggyback with a thing I didn't like about this, which is that a lot of heroes in movies throughout film, but maybe particularly lately, are these very stoic characters where they are, like when we watch Devs, for example, these characters are clearly written and directed to not have any positive emotions. And I find that it's a trope that I'm just getting tired of,
I agree.
Right. And, Berto just put on some sunglasses and looked very, but,
robotic.
But it's also like the Matrix, right? Like when they enter the Matrix, they all act like anime characters. And there's always that one Japanese anime character who is like super awesome as a fighter, but they're like really quiet and they're suffering, but they'll never talk about it. And it's a very Japanese ideal, by the way.
Right.
And I'm if it only cropped up every once in a while, I would be fine. But I'm getting tired of these non-emotional, non-real, I feel like I'm watching like a blank canvas of a character sometimes. Do you know what I'm saying?
Instead, you want like a Woody Allen. Like I'm just gonna tell you everything that's on my mind because
good.
No,
so,
yeah.
So
and that
there's
accounts for one of mine too. That would be one, I think, a reason it would be like a minus the 10 or the -9 is because there was that one scene. Remember when they were playing squash and she had that really authentic moment where she's laughing and being goofy. I feel like that there could have been more of that where we see the walls go down, because I know part of the performance was building those walls, but they're not like that all the time.
Right.
So few people are. You know?
Right, exactly. And I find that it's a trope and I'm getting tired of it. And if I only saw it every once in a while, it wouldn't bother me, but I'm seeing it so. But anyway, complicated woman character, very refreshing. We have a lot of time to explore who she is and how she reacts to things and see a very long story arc. And the story is 100% focused on her. And the actress does a tremendous job, with all the various different ups and downs. By the way, Berto, that actress looks like she could be your sister.
Really?
She has those really wide eyes, just like you do.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, she
and
looks.
The red hair and
she looks just like someone who could be related.
You're
to
both
you.
gorgeous. I mean, yeah.
I liked that it was. God, stop that. I liked that it was a simple story. It wasn't. There were no car chases or guns or violence. Or
I'm not going to write a third act where the character learns a valuable life lesson and then they go on a car chase. And
okay, Charlie. And yet it was very entertaining. I was pretty much gripped the entire time. Mm-hmm. But it was I find it's very commendable when a screenwriter can take something so mundane like adaptation. I mean, adaptation, the first 2/3 of the movie is still an excellent movie.
Excellent.
And it's really a story about something very mundane. It's about a journalist who befriends some kind of character who likes to get orchids from the swamps of Florida. And
technically, it's about
a writer who's trying
to write that boring story.
But it's such an entertaining movie, and this production similar, very simple story. There was very little sensationalizing, and yet entertaining, which I thought was great. Y'all mentioned cinematography was just out of this world. I cannot think of another production that has as good of a style, a look, cinematography, a tone, the sets. I'm pretty sure whoever was in charge of the locations and the sets and the rugs and the chairs and the wallpaper and the light fixtures has some advanced there's some sort of advanced savant when it comes to shooting interiors. You know what I mean? I mean, these locations were so fantastic, and every little detail. The other thing was, I'm old enough to remember these kinds of locations. I'm old enough to remember what TVs looked like back then. I wasn't alive in the 60s, but in the 70s, a lot of things still existed. People in the 70s didn't have brand new TVs. They had TVs from 1968 or something, and so much of this was spot on. I mean, there were so many little details, and whenever I watch period pieces, I'm always looking for when are they going to throw in something from the 70s? They're going to a collar or a handbag or a chair or a TV set or a phrase. There was one phrase that actually kind of threw me. I think someone said something like, I kicked his ass. And I was like, they didn't say that back then. But they would have said something like, you really licked him, which doesn't, that was something they said all the time back then. You really licked him, keeps a licking and keeps on ticking. Yeah. Oh. But you never hear that at all today. It's a weird phrase, right?
I mean, I say lick a lot for other reasons, but yeah. Wait, so total parentheses, sorry to add Star Wars in every conversation, but this was one of the things that I didn't like about some scenes in the first season of Mandalorian, and in one brief scene of the second season, that they added colloquialisms and sort of like the kind of chat that you would do currently, and maybe as a way to relate, but it totally threw me out. So those anachronisms, which this Star Wars is a long time ago, this show is a long time ago. I hate when that happens.
Yeah. There's a fine balance there, where of course you have to use language and at least some slang to flesh out the characters, but at the same time, if there's like R2D2 is talking to C3PO and C3PO is just like,
"What's up, dog?
What's up? I have FOMO. LOL." But anyway, the style from beginning to end, the look, the sets, the dresses, was so accurate and so beautiful. The one criticism I would have is when we look at the 60s and beyond, we see a lot of black and white film and pictures. And what this will do to people's minds of today is they'll think everything was colorless. But there was a lot of color back then, because if you wanted to have a really standout dress, you wore bright ass green, especially in the 60s. I mean, the 60s was Technicolor abound. I mean, they went crazy with colors in the 60s. But because everything's in black and white, or most things are in black and white, or at least the film is very subdued and the color isn't very good, they, in this in this production, everything was muted. There was no one wore like bright reds or greens or oranges, but you would have seen that everywhere, especially by the late 60s. So that was a little bothersome to me, but what are you going to do? I really loved that there were no cheesy moments, except for a couple towards the end. There was the moment with the dad, the last scene with the dad in the house, which I found to be a little cheesy, and the camera angle was super cheesy to me because she starts to, I don't know if you notice this, as Beth starts to, well, how much do you want for the house? Well, it's too expensive. Well, how much is it? As she starts to lay into him, you adopted me, this kind of stuff. The camera angle starts to move down to look up at her, and the camera angle starts to look up and down on him. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's that's a very film school 101 thing that you do, but it was so obvious, and I was just like, oh boy, here we go. And it was really kind of exaggerated. If it was a little subtler, I would have been okay. And it didn't need it. There was enough power in the dialogue that you didn't need that direction. But aside from that, and then there was another kind of monologue-y moment at the end as well. But anyway, it was very little cheesy. And the main non-cheese that almost every production has is usually you'll have cheesy villains that I won't like, or so the orphanage was not great, but you wouldn't characterize it as like abusive.
Right. There was no Nurse Ratched.
Right. The janitor was just a nice guy. He wasn't wanting to have sex with her. Like I kept waiting, like, okay, when's he gonna want to have sex with her?
Right.
Or the black guy the orderly. I'm like, oh, when is he gonna walk in on her when she's going to the bathroom? Like, and the Soviets weren't villainized. They're just like regular humans living in the Soviet Union. I felt like they went a little far with that because at the very end when she went, by the way, spoiler, when she beats Borloff or whatever his name is, he's like celebrating. But he would have been not happy.
Devastated.
Yeah, he would have been like, "Wait, I just got beat by someone, let alone a woman, let alone an American." I mean, the Soviets and the Americans were at war. It was no joke. So, is it possible that he would have celebrated the way Johnny held up, Ralph or what's his name?
You're all right, LaRusso.
Yeah, LaRusso. He holds up LaRusso and gives him, the trophy.
The trophy, yeah.
Is that possible? Sure. But the overall gist of the writing was, make an antagonist and then quickly, do a 180 and make you go, oh, it's not an antagonist. Jamie is the evil person, but no, not really. When Dudley comes in, he's the evil state champion, but he very quickly is a nice guy.
Yeah.
When Jojen Reed comes in, you're like, very quickly, he's kind of a antagonist. And then very quickly.
Wait, what a perfect role for him, because he's such a small dude generally.
Yeah.
But they made him a badass in this show, but it's a chess badass.
Right. I loved that. He has this dumbass hat and a stupid duster and like the dumbest mustache you've ever seen on a dude.
He's the coolest chess player in the world.
Hey, he gave her first orgasm, so he's cool in my book.
King of the nerds. Yeah. But anyway, there were so many different tropes that this show did. Every episode, there were probably like 5 moments where I was like, oh boy, here comes trope number 32, and it wouldn't do it. And like the mom, the adoptive mom, she was a complicated person. She was not the best mom, especially at the beginning. But then she kind of developed into a good mom, but she had sort of issues, and she fell in love with this guy. And, every time I was like, oh, here we go with this, and it wouldn't go that way. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, and the Mexican guy is going to be, oh, no, he's just the Mexican guy.
Right, he's just the Mexican guy. Like, it's,
Yeah.
I liked that a lot because, when you watch enough movies and TV shows, you eventually just see these things coming, and then when they come, you're like, oh, yeah. I also like this.
Here's a naive noob question for you guys really quickly. Her main guy that she liked from the beginning, the journalist, he was, this is going to sound so stupid. He was gay, right?
Oh, I don't know.
Wasn't he? Wasn't
I
that
didn't
the
get that.
the reason why he never? Because
I thought he liked her, but she rejected him.
no,
Weren't they interrupted?
No, remember he was staying in that room with the other guy, and that's when she came. I mean, he obviously liked her, but I got the sense the reason it never went anywhere is because he actually was a homosexual.
That's not how I took it. I took it as it was circumstantial, partially, and her distancing, and they just sort of crossed paths, and it just didn't. It just didn't work. I don't know though. I don't know.
But you're right. There is a sexual fluidity. I mean, when I was talking about her journey, I mentioned the 3 men, but she also sleeps with a woman, and there's there's not a whole lot. I mean, the word lesbian, gay, bi, or the words rather, none of them they're not even said, and it's just kind of matter of fact whoever she's attracted to or not attracted to.
Yep.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, but again, as I was two minds in that. When the one time when she gets together with a woman, it was during her huge night of self-destruction. That's night true. Before the championship, she gets super drunk and ends up sleeping with a woman, and it's unclear if that was something of that revealed her bisexuality or revealed self-destruction or something like
I really didn't like that character, the other person. I thought she was portrayed very well, and I like the actress and stuff. I just the character, I was like, she was such a saboteur. I was like, get away, go, get, like, and she's trying to do the right thing, and she's like, oh well, then in that case,
well, she saw her. I think in a way. She was a very important character because she was attracted to her success. And so that was another affirmation for Harmon in that, people, exactly. Like, is this what I have to offer? Because I'm a very successful chess player, then people are drawn to me and I get their attention.
She needed that. You're right. It's just, and so I'm totally not complaining, but like, I think it's great. Show wise, I just was like, get away, you ruin her. Like, she's trying to do good.
Yeah. The other thing, there's a line where at the end where he says, the press are going to want to talk to you. You're bigger than the monkeys. And I really
they said that?
Yeah, I really liked that because as I'm always talking about, Berto, you know this.
Yeah.
We tend to look back in the past and reduce an entire decade to like one or two things. When you think of like just any famous person from the 50s, you think Elvis Presley, okay? Maybe you think Frank Sinatra, maybe Marilyn Monroe, maybe James Dean, but like it never goes beyond that. And of course, 50 years from now, they're going to look back to us today and they're going to think of
me.
They're going to think of one person, and we all know who that is. It's a politician, right? It's,
Oh, I thought you were going to say Lady Gaga.
It's Kucinich. No.
Yeah.
They are going to reduce like a 20-year period of time to Donald Trump because
oh my God,
they won't
depressing.
They won't remember Adele or Lady Gaga or Bradley Cooper or all the other people that we pay attention to, of which in our time right now there are thousands of people we could rattle off the top of our head that are major, what do you call them, like celebrities that we would pay attention to. Someone that you would say, you're bigger than blank. And for another trope that they will do, another inaccuracy that you'll see is they'll say, you're bigger than the Beatles. Like that's what they would be tempted to say. But people of the 60s know that the Monkees were gigantic. But they didn't last because they were considered a joke and they were loved by young people, like really young people. And so today, a lot of people don't even know they might have heard of the Beatles, but they don't know the Monkees. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I liked that as well. Just a little touch of like, it's a little bit more accurate.
Yeah, good catch. Good catch.
Also, it had mostly accurate chess. So, Collin, you say you don't know chess, that you know the moves, but you don't. Berto, have you ever played chess very much?
Oh yeah. So I've gone in waves throughout my life. When I was little, I was really into it, but it's so funny when that scene when she's like, I don't like these books that you memorizing all the. That's exactly how I felt, and that's why I stopped playing.
Yeah.
Because I had these friends, I forget what grade we were in, and they all like reading the books, and I would like, what's Sicilian defense? And it seemed so boring to me to have to memorize, and so I gave up because I would be trying to like forecast the moves, and then they would do something, and like, well, that's anyways. So then I went without playing for years and years and years. And then maybe 10 years ago or something, my brother was like, we should play chess. And I'm like, I haven't played in it forever. And then I got into this YouTube downward spiral of chess videos. And then that went. And then more recently, I got into it again, probably because of the Queen's Gambit. So
yeah. You had a very similar childhood in essence. And I consider it similar to my life with golf. I've had a couple different golf gambits, if you will, in my life. And it's a very similar process where in the beginning, you're terrible. When you first play chess against people that barely understand chess, you will be crushed right away because but after you play, say, 20, 100 times, you start actually being able to compete and you'll crush the newbies,
Right.
And but in order to get to the next plateau of ability, that's where you read all the books. That's where you literally play. It's well known in the chess world that in order to get good, you have to play like thousands of chess games. It's not just a matter of like getting a little bit better. You have to just dedicate like, I am going to play thousands of speed chess, and I'm going to lose most of them because I'm playing people that are better than me. Yeah. But eventually things will start clicking in my brain. Maybe like 7 years from now, something will start clicking in my brain. I mean, that's the way you do it. It's the same with golf. Like when you first start playing golf, you're hitting like, you're on an 18 hole, you're hitting like 130 or something. And then if you play enough, now you're starting to get sub 100. It's sort of like with bowling, for example. The first time you bowl, you're hitting lots of gutter balls. You start bowling a little bit more. Now, you crest 100 points on the bowling alley, and you're thinking, man, I'm getting pretty good. Right. Well, if you want to get to like above 200, you've got to bowl every day, and you've got to think about your technique, and it's all in the weeds of the boredom and no fun anymore. You know what I mean? And so I had a very similar thing, but the story that I'll tell is I'm probably, so I would have been maybe like 4th grade, and my brother's best friend lived next door, and he was a state champ in chess. And this was when I was really into chess. I'm in the 4th grade, and I loved playing chess. And I sat him down. His name is Kelly, and I'm like, hey, play me in chess. And he's like, okay. And so we sit down and we play chess, and I beat him. And I'm like, I'm a chess god. I beat the state championship. And, my life with chess kind of, waned after a while beyond that. Fast forward, I don't know, 10, 20 years later, I'm thinking back on that time, and I'm like, and the whole time up until that moment, I'm like, when I was in 4th grade, I beat the state champ.
The state champion.
and then I thought about it just for half a second more, and I was like, well, he let me win, of course. Like, there's no way that I beat him. You know what I mean? But for years, I thought I beat the state championship.
Dude, in a small, tiny way, I remember that realization with my dad. When the moment, I don't know how old I was, but the moment I realized, oh, wait a minute, all those games we used to play, when I won, I don't know if I really won.
Yeah. That's a good old person, is to trick you into actually thinking that you actually won. Yep. The last thing that I loved about this production is that they did not say based on a true story. This would have been so tempting to say based on a true story. You could have said it was kind of based on Bobby Fischer or something. Yeah. And so many movies and TV shows now, in order to raise the profile or to make it more intense, will extremely loosely base it on a true story. And then when you look up the story, the real story, you're always like completely disappointed. You're just like, oh my God, you made up all of that stuff. Like, if you're going to make a fictional story, just make a fictional story. People write fiction. Lord of the Rings isn't based on anything that happened.
That would have been awesome. Lord of the Rings based on real events.
I mean, literally, there are movies that are like that, and I just want to shake these writers and say, like, just write fiction. It's okay. Then you're free to write whatever you want to, and 99% of people never Google, is this accurate? And so they just get away with it. It drives me nuts. And it actually took me a couple episodes watching this because I assumed it was based on a true story because it just has that feel to it. You know what I mean? And I looked it up. I was like, oh, this is fiction. And I was just like so happy. I thought, someone just wrote fiction and made a fictional story, Indiana Jones, fictional story. It's just like, just write fiction. Collin, did you like that too?
I did. Yeah, I feel like it would have cheapened it. And you were mentioning that they didn't pull any big cheesy moments, or rather they didn't generate them by creating unnecessary extraneous drama, which was very much Ratchet. We mentioned Ratchet earlier, and it felt like just being so separate from pulling those punches really helped drive home the effectiveness of the narrative, because you're not being pandered to. And that's another reason why I think it's harder for some viewers to, like us, as we've discussed earlier, maybe attach some of what we would have thought would have gone into a story that takes place with a woman in a highly sexist time, in a highly sexist world, because I think that maybe they were tempted to throw in some of those scenes and perhaps decided that it wasn't right to do so because it didn't maybe work thematically with what they were going for. But anyway, we've talked about that to death. But I wanted to mention also something that you were, Kirk, talking about the way the sets looked, and I think the locations were phenomenal, but the camera work highlighted those in this really subtle way that made you feel like every set was a game board, because they had these really wide shots that would pull in and show you the entire room, and it would slowly get closer, and when Harmon would enter these big chess rooms, we'd really get to see where she was walking from, and it made everything feel so real. And also there would be really cool crane shots where I don't know if they're crane shots, I'm probably mislabeling that, but they'd pull out of windows. At one point they pulled out of a window and they wrapped around the building, and just these just that sense of life in the camera really made it feel like you were a part of the game. And so every single scene you're like, all right, I'm down for it. And also it was important that it was accurate, like you were saying, because I don't think that would have worked if it felt like they were a bunch of set pieces. So in other words, real location plus the implication of game board via camera, those powers combined, I think, made something exquisite.
Yeah.
As you're saying this, like, totally agree. I hadn't thought about this at all. But wow, because I felt like I really understood the orphanage layout and where everything was, and I felt like I inhabited it. Same thing with her house. Obviously less so all the other places because we don't spend as much time, but you're right. And there is something about it like positional. Wow, good catch.
Do either one of you have memories of taking erasers into outside the classroom and beating them to get the chalk out, Collin?
Yeah.
Like, I never had to do that, but I certainly remember the challenge of chalk.
So Collin, even though you're younger, you had that experience?
I did, absolutely, and I actually really enjoyed it, and I still kind of do.
It wasn't all like whiteboards and stuff?
Well, it was whiteboards. It's one of these things as I'm about to enter my 30s, I'm realizing that memories of elementary school and middle school are blending together in terms of, wait a minute, when was I playing with these toys? When did that transition happen? And also technology has become a little vague. And I'm like, which computer was I using? Was it still green? Because I have vague memories of the green computers, and then slowly the Microsoft stuff. So Anyway, yeah, definitely. And I actually really enjoyed the chalk, because I always thought that and I was often drawing with chalk on sidewalks. That was one of I love doing that, because I wasn't too good at small coloring. Let me try and define this a little better. So coloring that takes place on a page. Wasn't too good at that as a kid.
You're better at broad sketches.
Right, because I would get frustrated. I would get frustrated that it would take so much time to fill in all these things. But with chalk, you've got this big canvas, big old bold strokes. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I welcomed it. I asked the teacher to let me bang, and also I would pretend it was magic. So I would bang it and pretend I was doing a spell. I'd be like, Shalakazoo or Expelliarmus. Well, not Expelliarmus, because I hadn't read Harry Potter at that point.
Well,
but
I wonder if this was sort of a thing in the U.S. that wasn't as popular in Colombia. Chalk, of course, was. And I have memories of every day my hands would be covered in chalk and my pants would have chalk marks, because you either were asked to go up or just in between classes, we would get up and draw all sorts of things on the board. We'd throw chalk to each other. But what I don't ever remember is who cleaned the erasers.
It's probably the janitor.
Maybe.
They often did. But some teachers would ask us to go outside. It wasn't into the basement. That's kind of a dumb thing. Why would you go in the basement? You'd just go outside, where you do it. Or you do it against...
That's where we would go. That's basement? What that is. I was thinking that exact same thing, Kirk, because I remember it would be like, all right, you go to the outdoor classroom and clap on the erasers. Like, that's exactly what it was. And I also, as we were talking about it, I know that I'm longing for the sound of chalk on a chalkboard. Like, as in my, like, what we're quote-unquote ASMR... Yeah, like I don't know what, like, I know you can make it really, really creepy and jarring, but like just the that kind, not the screech, but yeah.
So I'm looking up chalk ASMR, and there definitely is chalk ASMR on YouTube, but there's two categories I'm seeing. One is what you're talking about, which is people drawing chalk on a chalkboard. But then there's another one.
Exactly like what Berto's doing.
There's another type of chalk ASMR. Can either of you guess what it is besides drawing on a board?
Skanking with chalk.
That's a good guess, but no.
I'm going to say crunching chalk?
Yes, eating it.
Oh, eating?
Right.
Wait.
Yeah.
Eating. So there's an Asian guy, ASMR, edible chalk, no talking, crunchy eating sounds.
Oh my God.
A Korean guy, a Korean guy eating, the picture is, it's a big chalk thing and it's halfway in his mouth, and he's looking very seductive at the camera.
I was gonna say that's suggestive.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so let's get off this train. So things I didn't like was that she beat almost everyone, particularly in the beginning. This is another thing about movies like this, of hero quests that are a little, I don't know. I wish it was win 3, lose 1, win 3, lose 1, that kind of thing. One, because it would have made me worry more about her losing. Like, I never once worried that she was going to lose, or that she was going to, or I never thought she wasn't going to eventually win the whole thing. Like, I never, because they never really made it seem like she was capable of losing, So but there was Kirk, that.
So I see what you're saying, and I don't disagree, but there is a different modality. It's like the Ender's Game style of storytelling where your hero is a savant, and that is a style. And
but once you go to the level of the world stage, they're all savants. You know what I mean?
But that's what we encountered, and I think.
But she crushed all of them. Now, yes, she did. She was in the World Championships in the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
and she crushed even the main guy. She crushed.
But that was at the end. That was at the very end.
But leading up to that, I'm not saying it's a bad way to write a script. I'm just saying that it would have been more enjoyable for me if I worried about her losing and winning. And when you play chess, no one wins all the time. Even people that are really good at it, they lose sometimes, because
Kasparov was undefeated.
but in like little matches here and there, you know what I mean? Like the one time she did lose was to, she would lose to Benny sometimes, like when they were doing that speed rounds. And so that actually I liked, because I was like, oh, okay, she's not like a god of chess. She can be beat. You know what I mean?
I know. Again, I do hear. It's just the difference between, so like in a Jackie Chan movie, he starts off terrible. Oh, he might know a little bit, but he's mostly terrible. And he's got to go to the master, and then he slowly starts getting better. But there's a different kind of movie, like the Steven Seagal movie, where the guy's a badass to start with. He almost never has a challenge except when he's facing the final bosses.
Right.
And even then, it's like because they have guns.
Right. This was the Steven Seagal of chess movies.
Well, I think in some ways, maybe the theming of the movie, you know, because I mentioned earlier, like the difference between the story and the plot. I think that maybe the story was overwhelming the plot at that point. I would agree. I think that they wanted to communicate, because again, the script was so finessed and almost like, and that's the thing about a script. Sometimes you can work it within an inch of its life and you don't see a flaw, but then the flawlessness becomes a little apparent in this instance, because, you know, she had mastered her, in other words, she had gotten to a particular place with her self-esteem issues and her consumption issues and her depression, that those elements, those factors were less in control of her. And I think they wanted to capitalize on that and be like, she's playing with the big boys, and because she's learning about herself and she's done the work on herself, she's going to win in this way. But I mean, I would agree. I think it felt a little unrealistic. And I had that moment of just lack of tension, even though I was still enjoying what was visually happening.
Right, particularly in the beginning when it's clear that she hasn't studied it, she hasn't had a lot of experience playing with a lot of different players, and right from the beginning, she just crushed, like humiliated everybody, you know? Now, is that possible? For sure, but it just made it kind of boring for me to watch. I'm like, well, we've seen this scene before. She's going to crush everyone. And
so you felt this way throughout, like from the beginning to the end?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like when she enters the tournament with, like, when she's doing that thing with the schoolboys and she's in that big half circle with like 20 different opponents, it would have been better for my taste if she lost 2 out of 20, you know, and said, and she would even say something like, yeah, I let that one get away from me. Good game. You know, just something other than like, she's just a god of chess, where I want to worry a little bit. You know what I mean? I don't want to feel like, well, you know, I know where this story is going. She's going to win the whole thing, which is what happened. The other thing... Go ahead.
There is this element, though, of the big fish in little ponds. And that is a real phenomenon. You see it in athletics all the time. Like, as an example, you know, I swam in high school, and the best guy on my team was amazing, you know? And then we went to state, and I got to see like the state level, and I was like, oh man. And that's not even Olympics level. And so like, you're in your little pond and you think, so I think what they were demonstrating, don't disagree with you ultimately, that it definitely lowered the stakes, but there's like, she was a huge fish and she didn't get to the right pond for a while.
Right. The other thing, this isn't a complaint about the movie, but why in the world, I understand at the lower levels, but once you get to a certain level, why in the world do you have to record your own moves?
I know, how boring.
Can't someone else keep track of your stupid games, like, so that you can focus on the game itself, you know?
It might be actually as a result of the players themselves, though. They might be like, I'm not going to trust anyone. Like, I'm going to have my moves because, you know.
Yeah,
what if they tried it and there were too many controversies?
I got a Phantom Menace chessboard that I didn't play that much that would record your moves. It was, I think this was late elementary school, and every time you placed one of the pieces, it would go beep and then put it on the little thing. So
that's awesome. What's the Phantom Menace?
You had a chessboard that was Phantom Menace themed?
Yes, I was so obsessed with Star Wars that was a gift that was bequeathed unto me. Yes, so, and I wish I still had it.
Yeah. What were the figures? Were there like Yoda
See,
figures.
as Berto just said that, I don't remember if there was a Jar Jar piece. I can very visibly, I can remember the Queen Amidala queen because it had the...
Oh, right, of course.
She had the big, huge pigtails from the Senate scene where she's like, I will not defer. And then we've got I think the villains. I think the funniest thing I do remember is that Darth Maul was the queen, which I always thought was a little funny because, well, I think it's funny now.
Well, he's the most mobile, right? So.
Yeah.
Because there's a Plinkett joke. So Mr. Plinkett does these Star Wars videos. I will wrap this up. This has nothing to do with Queen's Gambit. I'm so sorry, but he makes all these comparisons to, like, that are making fun at the way that George was inclusive in the prequels because he was terribly he was terrible at it. And so he's like, we had the first he talks about like how racist the Nemoidians are, and then he's like, and then we even saw the first homosexual in Star Wars, and then he adds like dance music to Darth Maul doing the lightsaber moves. Anyway, just saying.
Yeah. The other thing I didn't like, another trope, it wasn't that bad, but that they conflate genius with mental issues. This is a frequent thing that they will do in movies that it's like, I'm just tired of it. It's also not a very accurate way of looking at people. Anyway, the other thing I didn't like was that it made addiction seem really easy to recover from.
Oh, yes.
Like, she doesn't get any help. She just says, yeah, I'm just not going to drink or take pills anymore.
It's just a decision, man.
Yeah, she just makes that choice, and it's no big deal. And, she had a couple bad moments where she binged, and no consequences from that, by the way. And then she just moves on. And I'm reminded of Flight with Denzel Washington, where he's the pilot. And that is a good depiction of addiction and making it entertaining at the same time, because you just see how nearly impossible it is to overcome addiction when it gets its roots down.
Yeah, best I've seen is Mad Men, but I think I have to change my rating now. It's a 7. I didn't even think about it. No, that's a big enough leap. It really is. I just, as he said that, it reminded me of that scene where she drops it in the toilet as if to say no more, and I'm like, no.
Look, I could defend it just as easily. That's a moment in time. We don't see the rest of her life. This is only within a matter of like a couple months.
Hey, he's in the 7 camp, and you're alone in the 8 camp. So live with it.
You quitter. People's front of quitters.
So what if we did that every time we do one of these things where it's like whoever's in the lone camp tries to suck someone into their camp?
Yeah, it's like a meta game.
Yeah. And because I've changed mine sometimes in talking with y'all. Like sometimes,
but then I have to take a benzo and I'll see all of y'all in the ceiling. I'm like, there's Collin.
I mean, none of us have control over our ratings anyway. Palpatine is behind them all. So.
Yeah.
Oh, that's no. Jar Jar is behind them.
Jar Jar, sorry.
Yeah. The last thing I didn't like is a small thing where this happens a lot, is when they need an establishing shot of like an exterior or an airplane landing, and they don't. And they'll digitize, they'll digitally create it. So I don't know if you in the last episode, an airplane lands in Soviet Union, and it's pretty clear it's a computer generated.
Isn't it like a sunset when it happens?
No, it's raining and it's night. It might be sunsetty. I don't know. But the point is that we didn't need the shot. We and you can just see them doing the storyboard. She's in the plane with the CIA guy or the security guy.
Right.
And they're talking. And then the next scene, she's in a car. She's getting into a car and she's going to the hotel. They need some scene there where they're like, well, maybe people won't realize that the plane landed. So instead of just
How do you get from inside a plane
you
to
joke,
inside a cab?
You joke, but there are script notes that are like that. Believe me.
Yeah. So I could see that, and then and I could see them saying, okay, well, we don't have time, and we can't actually shoot an accurate because they really want to shoot accuracy too, and it would have been a Soviet Union plane that doesn't exist anymore, and so instead they're like, well, we'll just create a digital shot, and it completely ruins it for me because you cannot digitally create a plane without it looking like a digital plane to my eyes.
You're right.
Anyway.
I'm going down to a 6 now. That's ridiculous.
But to me, it's just like, just don't have the shot. Everyone understands that if she's in a car, the plane must have landed, and do we need to see everything? Do we need to see her, get the bag out and
Well, actually,
walk
I was
across
wondering
the
how she
tarmac?
got her bags.
Yeah, like
now
where
that
are the
you
bags?
mention it.
Well, now I didn't realize how much I was wondering. Now it's a 5 because without knowing where those bags came
We're
from,
gonna end up at a 1.
All right, let's conclude with just some notes about the people who worked on this. We have Scott Frank, who's been around a long time. Do you know what? He's mainly a writer, so this is his first directorial thing, but as far as I know. But do you know what else he's written? Any idea?
I do not.
No.
He wrote Logan, which is a very...
Oh my gosh. I love Logan.
Yeah.
Logan. Yeah.
He wrote Minority Report, which is great.
I like Minority Report.
He wrote Out of Sight, a Steven Soderbergh movie, which is really good.
Oh yeah, with what's her name? I love that. When George Clooney.
Yeah, J-Lo, right?
I like that movie.
Yeah. A great movie, actually. I think it's J-Lo's best movie, honestly. And
Well, there's Geely, so easy.
Hey,
And-
you got to see Hustlers. She kills in that.
she's great, but I didn't like that movie tremendously as a movie. Out of Sight is a great movie. Get Shorty, he wrote as well, which is one of my favorite repeat
Wait,
watches.
he wrote Get Shorty?
Not the
That's
TV show,
right!
but the movie. The movie Get Shorty.
I didn't know there was a TV show.
Oh, the TV show, the first season is so good. The second season,
I didn't even know about it. Okay,
yeah.
no, I'm talking about the movie.
Yeah.
So now this guy is one of my favorite writers of all time. What's going on?
Yeah. I mean,
How
so
has
you
he
like,
been unknown? Like, I don't know his name at all.
yeah, Scott Frank. You like Get Shorty?
I love Get Shorty.
Yeah, I watch that probably once every 6 months and enjoy it every single
so good.
time. Yeah.
I didn't know there was a show. I'm going to have to check
We
that
got to
out.
have a Get Shorty party.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do. Of course, the lead played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Anya. She is a chameleon of an actress. You remember her from The Witch, of course, right?
Witch.
You remember her from Split and Glass as, one of the abductees, the main abductee. And she's been in a lot of other things as well. Bill Camp plays the custodian, who has been in so many things. And I love that guy. He plays
He's
such...
a role player, yeah.
Yeah, he's such a complicated actor, and he plays just the most amazing... Whenever I see him, I'm like, oh, casting director really knows what they're doing. My favorite thing that Bill Camp has been in that really kind of felt like I discovered him, or I don't know, not discovered, but discovered him in my life is The Night of...
Kirk found him.
Yeah. Is HBO miniseries called The Night of 2016. Have any of you seen this?
No.
It is really good. It's a story about this a taxi driver, immigrant family, who he has some kind of blackout, and he's accused of killing someone.
Ooh, sounds interesting. Don't spoil it.
And the whole miniseries is his imprisonment and trial and investigation. And
Is the night before the theme song?
and Bill Camp, I believe, is the cop, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, and then of course Harry Melling, who plays Harry Beltic, who was Dudley Dursley in the Harry Potter films.
That's crazy.
And we have Thomas Brody Sangster as Benny Watts, who was Jojen Reed and Game of Thrones and was a kid in Love Actually, apparently, as you said.
He's the
I've never
little
seen
kid.
that.
I love him.
I've never seen that movie, and whenever I see a scene from it, I'm like, this movie is cheesy as
Wait, what?
Love Actually?
You've never seen Love Actually? You've actually never seen it?
No.
Dude, no. You gotta give it a chance. It's a great Christmas movie. It's so
Cheesy?
touching and good. Is it cheesy? Yes, the best kind of cheese. Camembert, whatever. You gotta do it.
In my
It's worth
household,
a React video, too, because you might question some of these relationship dynamics.
Oh,
Really?
it's so good.
in my household, we have only space for one super cheesy Christmas movie that we watch every Christmas, which is Christmas at the Cranks. Anyone ever seen that one?
I see.
Oh, that with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Alan.
Yeah, that movie is not good, but
No.
more power to you.
No, it is not good, but we watch it every year, and it's more it's more Stacy's tradition than mine, but it's sort of become mine by osmosis, and so we watch that terrible movie every Christmas.
Ours is The Holiday. So
The Holiday.
Wow.
What's that one?
it's with Cameron Diaz, Jude Law, and she house swaps with Kate Winslet.
Oh,
Britain goes to L.A. L.A. goes
is
to
Jack Black in that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a Christmas movie?
Yeah, it happens around Christmas time, and the English part of it is very idyllic. It's in the countryside and snowing, and so you get those warm Christmassy vibes from it for sure.
I feel like we're stretching the Christmassiness.
So, are there
But
any?
Love Actually is a great movie.
I like Love Actually too. I mean, I do.
All right. Are there any gay Christmas movies for people to watch?
Love Actually.
Recently, there was one with Aubrey Plaza and Mackenzie Davis.
Oh yeah, I heard about this.
Yeah, and Kristen Stewart. I don't even know what the title is. The Happiest Day, The Happiest Christmas.
Like a Netflix movie or something, right?
Yeah, and it is what it is. It's
I
bad.
love Aubrey Plaza, so if she's good in it.
She's not in it enough. I also love her, and yeah, but she does have the best scenes in the movie. Yeah,
Okay.
her and Dan Levy both, who I also love.
Oh right, Dan Levy's in it too, right? Yeah. So today, this episode is coming out after we did the live show on YouTube. So, but we're recording it before. But I thought we could act like it came out. So, man, that was really fun on Saturday.
Yeah, man, that one moment though, I couldn't believe everything that could go wrong went wrong. We sort of recovered though. I'm wondering how your elbow is doing, frankly. And then Collin, more power to you. That thing you showed us, like, that was amazing.
I'm so happy that you won. Person, I'm pointing to the screen. You know who you are. Good win.
Yeah.
We know who you're pointing to.
And right. So, have we decided what teams we are? Have you determined that yet?
What teams?
Well, it's I was about to say drum roll, but these drum rolls they've already happened. But so when we were recording, so today, Thursday, it's the day before the pre-show. So the pre-show is happening on Discord for our Friday Discord dish, and so fans will be competing to represent you. When you play, each of you will have team. We're just going to use some hypothetical fans here. So, for example, Kirk could be Team Bronwyn, or Humberto could be Team Ed, or Team Show, or Team Louise. So,
not Louise.
That's what's going to happen.
I will not be Team Louise.
You might have to. You
love you,
don't
Louise.
have a choice. It's whoever wins the trivia tomorrow.
I will do whatever team.
And then whatever team wins, then what, Collin?
The person who you are representing, I'm not sure if I've said it both ways, whoever is representing who, that fan gets to pick a topic. So if Team Louise is Kirk's camp, then Louise gets to pick a topic that we'll cover on the podcast. And it
We
can
know all
be
this because this
her
already
choice.
happened.
Yeah, it already happened.
She, him, they won already.
And dudes, what you guys did with the chalk in your mouth on Saturday was just over the
Don't
top.
mention it. I thought we weren't going to talk about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. I'll do a little bit of ASMR. That does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
You deserve it.
Thank you once again for having me, Berto and Kirk. Ooh.
stop trying to be funny.